Hi, Odyssey Camper here. I'm getting ready to insulate the NV200, but the first thing I want to do is apply some butyl rubber sound deadener to the larger panels. This will quiet the vehicle down quite a bit and keep the larger panels from vibrating. The product I'm using is called No Noise. It's used by stereo installers. There are other brands on the market. It's a self-adhesive butyl rubber. You cover each panel about 80% and it reduces the resonance of that panel, and it makes a huge difference. I've used it in other vehicles. Makes a huge difference quieting things down. So I'll apply it to the larger steel panels and in the wheel wells. After I apply the sound deadener on all the panels, I'm going to apply a closed cell foam layer over the top of it. Now this is an insulating product, but the primary reason I'm using it is for sound insulation and also to prevent the accumulation of condensation against the steel. So it'll keep the warm, moist air from inside the van from condensing on the outside of the van when it's cold out. And it also provides a little bit of thermal insulation. It is a closed cell foam. The mylar on the inside will provide a little bit of heat reflectivity. I didn't want to add inches of insulation that was going to radiate heat out all night. I wanted to keep the insulation thin to provide a little bit of heat insulation in the wintertime, but keeping warm isn't really a problem. I've got my sleeping bags and whatnot. I just want to keep the condensation off the steel panels. If you add too much insulation, then in the summertime, that insulation traps heat and radiates it all night. So unless you're running your air conditioner, you end up hotter trying to sleep at night. So I'd like to keep it thin so the heat can dissipate from the vehicle. So the last product I'm going to use is a 4-way stretch carpet. And this is what you would use if you were building a subwoofer box or something like that. And the product I bought has kind of a grayish color. I think it contrasts nice with the black panels in the van. So when I cover the white surfaces, it'll be a nice contrast. And if I don't like the way it looks, I can always cover the black panels with it as well to get one color. But I think the color contrast will break up the lines of the interior a little bit. As I mentioned, there are a couple different brands of the butyl rubber sound isolator. I use the No Noise brand. It's something I've worked with before, and my son did his whole Honda Element with it, and it worked really well. After removing the paper backing from the butyl rubber, you can stick it in place and then roll it with this urethane rolling tool to make sure that it adheres properly to the metal. To remove the interior panels, you're going to have to pull out these push pins, and it goes easier if you have a push pin removal tool. This is something you can get in an auto body supply store, but I'll put a link below. This is a 30-degree tip on this tool. Here's the door with the panel off it. We'll see more of that later on. So to start trimming the No Noise, you want to grab a razor knife, and this one isn't particularly sharp. It doesn't have to be. You just want to score the material. And once you score along the line, you can pick it up and it'll just break apart. At this point, I haven't removed the backing off of it yet. And then I cut it up into smaller pieces to fit in small spaces. It doesn't have to touch and be one contiguous piece. As long as you get 75 to 80% coverage on the panel, you'll get some good sound resonance control. And you can stick those in different directions and different shapes. Before sticking the No Noise in place, it's a good idea to clean the surface. I used acetone because it doesn't disturb the paint and it doesn't leave a residue behind. After giving the acetone a couple minutes to evaporate, you'll peel the paper backing off of the No Noise and then stick it in place on the door. For the top of the door, I just used one large piece to stick on that flat metal. And you can see what 80% plus coverage looks like inside the door. It doesn't have to be pretty, no one's ever going to see this, but it makes a big difference in the resonance of the panel. And unfortunately there was traffic noise in the background, so you can't hear my finger tap, but trust me, it was solid and it didn't resonate at all. So let's compare some other panels. So here's the difference between 75% coverage on this panel and no coverage on this panel. Same device, whacking on both sides of it. Definitely makes a huge difference in the resonance. And here's how it sounds with the resonance dampener in place. Some of the worst offenders for resonance in the NV200 are the wheel wells. I don't know if you can hear that ringing like a drum. Do something about that. Not sure if you'll be able to hear the difference, but it's a much deader panel now. It doesn't resonate like a bass drum. So you only need to do about an 80% coverage. I'm probably closer to 90. And the insulation will go over that and cover it up. Here's the first step in covering that entire wheel well with a closed cell foam. About halfway through the project, I decided to stop and add some window film to the windows on the NV200. I didn't want the windowed model or cargo van, but that was all that was available at the time. So I think adding the white film on the windows makes everything look a lot more uniform. And as you can see, it doesn't really block the view out. It does block the view in through these tiny little holes, and it also rejects a lot of heat from the sun that would normally land on the glass. Pretty good modification for about $30. The plan is to cover all the exposed white surfaces inside the van with this closed cell foam. First thing I did is roll it out in the ground and then started measuring. I wanted to close off the cavities of the doors first, both the rear doors and the side doors. So using this black weather strip and gasket adhesive, I just reapplied that on the same line and then added the closed cell foam over it. Trimmed the edges with some Reflectix tape. But eventually all these surfaces will be covered with the closed cell foam, and then covered at the top with carpet. For the panels that fit right above the wheel wells, I decided to add the closed cell foam right to the back side of the panel. I've already added the sound deadener inside the vehicle. So what I did is trace these out, trace out the holes, trace out the outline onto the insulating material, and then use this high-strength 3M adhesive on both sides, similar to what I used to make my window panels in the old Odyssey camper. Spray both surfaces, give it about 5 minutes to set up, and then press them together, and the finished panel looks like this. This provides some thermal insulation, but also sound insulation. And if you make a mistake here, those panels are easy to replace. They're just corrugated plastic, and you can buy that at Home Depot. It's kind of what they make yard sale signs out of. Using an X-Acto blade or a razor blade, just cut an X in these holes, and that way you'll be able to put the push pins back in. The side doors got the same treatment as the rear doors. First the sound deadener and then the thermal insulation over the top, and then the panel was replaced on top of that. Here you can see the wheel well in progress using the 3M adhesive on both sides. We also put the sound deadener on the roof and then covered that with thermal insulation, and that made a huge difference on hot days when the sun's beating down. It was noticeably cooler in the van. Why did I take so many shots of this wheel well from different angles? Anyway, one other thing I did is go from 15 to 16 inch rims with a lower profile tire. That allowed me to put a wider contact patch. I've got about 1 inch more at each of the four corners. It made a huge difference in the braking and the handling. I'll cover that in an upcoming story on odysseycamper.com. Until then, thanks for watching. I'll probably finish up the insulation in the spring.